The pristine halls of the Galactic Academy of Higher Learning gleamed with an almost sterile perfection that made Zara Chen's colorful backpack feel like an act of rebellion. As the first human exchange student accepted into the Academy's prestigious Xenological Studies program, she had expected some culture shock. What she hadn't expected was the absolute absence of joy. "Student Chen, your respiratory rate indicates elevated excitement levels again," chirped her personal academic advisor, a crystalline being named X227 who resembled a sentient prism. "Please modulate your biological functions to maintain optimal learning conditions." Zara suppressed a sigh, or tried to, since even that would probably trigger another warning. After 3 months at the academy, she was still struggling to adapt to the relentlessly serious atmosphere. Every alien species here approached education with the same intense focus, as if learning was a sacred ritual that required absolute solemnity. "Sorry, X227, she replied, trying to keep her voice monotone. "I'll work on my enthusiasm regulation." The crystal being's facets sparkled and what Zara had learned was approval. "Excellent. Now, proceed to Laboratory Complex Delta for your advanced xenobiology practical examination." As she made her way through the winding corridors, Zara couldn't help but notice how her fellow students moved with precise, measured steps. The floating errands drifted in perfect geometric patterns. The ambulatory nexoids maintained exactly 2.7 meters of personal space between themselves and others. Even the amorphous blob species had developed a standardized way of oozing that somehow managed to look dignified. The examination room was already full when she arrived. Professor YX, a towering mantis-like being with compound eyes that shimmered like oil on water, clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement. "Student Chen, please take your designated station." Zara's workstation was next to KTXT, a nexoid who had become something close to a friend, or at least as close to a friend as one could get in a place where recreational social bonding was strictly regulated. KTXT's eye stalks swiveled in her direction, and their skin rippled in the subtle pattern that indicated greeting. "Today's examination," Professor YX announced, "will focus on stress response patterns across species. You will analyze the provided data and determine appropriate calming protocols for each case study." As holoprojectors flickered to life, displaying complex charts and biological readings, Zara felt that familiar bubble of frustration rising in her chest. She had spent months studying how different species dealt with stress, and one thing had become abundantly clear: none of them knew how to have fun. The data scrolled past her eyes: meditation techniques, chemical balance adjustments, consciousness synchronization protocols. All perfectly logical, scientifically sound methods of stress management. And all of them missing the most fundamental human solution: play. Without thinking, she raised her hand. Professor YX's antenna twitched in surprise. Interrupting an examination was practically unheard of. "Yes, Student Chen?" "Professor, I notice that none of these stress management protocols include recreational activities," Zara said, ignoring the shocked ripples moving through her classmates. "On Earth, we've found that engaging in play can be one of the most effective ways to reduce stress and improve cognitive function." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the normally burbling blobs went still. Professor YX's compound eyes reflected Zara's image 1,000 times over as he processed this statement. "Play," he repeated, as if testing an alien concept. "You suggest engaging in purposeless physical activity as a method of psychological regulation?" "Well, it's not exactly purposeless," Zara defended, warming to her topic. "Play helps develop problem-solving skills, improve social bonding, and releases beneficial neurochemicals. Plus, it's fun." "Fun," several voices echoed in various tones of confusion. KTXT's skin had turned the pale green shade that indicated deep thought. "Student Chen, are you suggesting that humans deliberately engage in chaos as a form of stress relief?" "Not chaos exactly," Zara said, though as she thought about some of her favorite games, she had to admit there was a certain controlled chaos involved. "Think of it as structured spontaneity." Professor YX's mandibles clicked rapidly, the equivalent of a professor clearing their throat. "Student Chen, while your species' unique approaches to biological regulation are fascinating, this is hardly the time or place for such discussions. Please return your attention to the examination. But Zara could see she had sparked something. Around the room, students were shifting in their seats, eye stalks and tentacles and sensory organs all focused on her with unmistakable curiosity. Even Professor YX's antennae were twitching in what she recognized as suppressed interest. A crazy idea began to form in her mind. The Academy was always encouraging innovative cross-species cultural exchange initiatives. What if? Professor, she said, straightening in her seat, I would like to propose an experimental study. A practical demonstration of human stress management techniques, with voluntary participants from various species. For science, of course. The professor's compound eyes whirled in complex patterns as he considered this. You wish to conduct a controlled experiment on recreational activity as a stress response modifier? Exactly. Zara tried to contain her excitement, knowing it would only make her seem more unstable. We could document the physiological and psychological effects across different species. It would be groundbreaking xenological research. For a long moment, Professor YX stood perfectly still, his external processing plates shifting colors as he thought. Finally, he spoke, submit a formal proposal by next cycle. Include safety protocols and specific activity parameters. He turned to address the class. The examination will now continue. As Zara turned back to her holoscreen, she caught KTXT giving her the skin ripple pattern that meant you're either brilliant or insane. She responded with what humans called a grin, knowing it would probably just confirm the insane part of that assessment. She had 3 days to figure out how to teach aliens to play. As she began formulating her proposal, she couldn't help but wonder if the Academy was ready for the chaos she was about to unleash in the name of science. But one thing was certain, school was about to get a lot more interesting. Now she just had to figure out which game to start with. Something simple, she thought. Something safe. Something that definitely wouldn't cause an interstellar incident. She had no idea how spectacularly wrong she would be about all of those things. Tag, Zara said confidently to the assembled academic review board. I propose we begin with the classic Earth game of tag. 7 different species of senior faculty members stared back at her with various arrangements of eyes, sensory stalks, and perception organs. Dean Vrax, a being composed entirely of shimmering energy contained within a ceremonial academic robe, pulsed with what might have been confusion. Elaborate on this tag protocol, the dean's voice resonated directly in everyone's minds. Zara pulled up her holopresentation, showing simplified animations of humans playing tag. One player is designated as it and must pursue other players. When they make physical contact with another player, that player becomes it and the roles reverse. The game continues until participants achieve sufficient recreational satisfaction. You propose, organized pursuit? Professor YX clicked, his mandibles twitching nervously. As a form of entertainment? Precisely. Zara beamed. It's perfect for our initial experiment. Simple rules, physical activity, social interaction, and minimal equipment needed. Professor ZHRL, a floating mass of tentacles and bioluminescent spots, darkened considerably. Student Chen, have you considered that for many species in this institution, being pursued triggers ancient prey instincts? Zara's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. She hadn't thought of that. Well, we could modify the rules. Maybe use proximity sensors instead of physical contact? And establish safe zones where players can take breaks? KTXT, who had surprisingly volunteered to be her research assistant, rippled their skin in the pattern that indicated support. If I may, honorable faculty, we've developed several species-specific modifications to make the activity more universally accessible. They brought up another hologram showing their proposed adaptations. Hover platforms for non-ambulatory species. Proximity fields calibrated to different biological comfort zones. Even a version for energy beings that involved harmless wavelength synchronization instead of physical contact. Dean Vrax's energy form sparkled with what Zara hoped was interest. The technological adaptations are intriguing. But what is the scientific purpose of this pursuit-based recreation? Zara straightened up. This was her moment. On Earth, we found that physical play serves multiple crucial functions. It helps develop spatial awareness, improves reaction time, builds social bonds, and releases stress-reducing biochemicals. But most importantly, it teaches adaptability. She gestured to the diverse array of faculty members. In this academy, we study how different species tackle problems. Humans have found that play, structured chaos, if you will, helps us think creatively and respond better to unexpected situations. Isn't that exactly what we're trying to achieve in xenological studies? Professor Yx's compound eyes whirled thoughtfully. Student Chen makes a valid point. Our current stress management protocols are perhaps overly rigid. Furthermore, KTXT added, their eye stalks swiveling excitedly, we've already received significant interest from the student body. 43 species have volunteered for the initial trial. This caused a stir among the faculty. Dean Vrax's energy form fluctuated rapidly. Such widespread voluntary participation is unprecedented. There are significant safety concerns, Professor Zhrel pulsed darkly. The liability implications alone. Which is why we've developed these, Zara interrupted, pulling out what looked like a sleek bracelet. Personal safety monitors. They track vital signs, stress levels, and enjoyment indicators for each participant. If anyone becomes genuinely distressed, the game immediately pauses in their vicinity. She slipped one on her wrist, and holographic readings sprang to life above it. See? Right now, my excitement levels are high, but within safe parameters. Heart rate elevated, but not concerning. Endorphin levels rising, which is exactly what we want to see. The faculty leaned in, those who had physical forms capable of leaning, to examine the readings. Professor Yx's antennae twitched with scientific interest. The data collection possibilities are significant. And think of the potential applications, Zara pressed her advantage. If we can prove that structured play improves learning outcomes and interspecies cooperation, it could revolutionize galactic education. Dean Vrax pulsed thoughtfully for several long moments. Finally, their energy form stabilized into a formal pattern. Proposal conditionally approved, with the following requirements: all sessions must be fully monitored. Medical staff on standby. Detailed data collection mandatory. And, they seemed to brighten slightly, I wish to observe the first session personally. Zara barely contained her urge to jump with joy, knowing it would only reinforce their views of human instability. Thank you, honored faculty. We won't let you down. As they left the review chamber, KTXT's skin rippled with nervous excitement. I still can't believe they approved it. Though I notice you didn't tell them about Phase 2. One thing at a time, Zara grinned. Let's see how they handle tag before we introduce them to capture the flag. They made their way to Laboratory Complex Gamma, which had been cleared for their first trial run. A diverse group of student volunteers was already waiting, their various appendages and sensory organs twitching with nervous anticipation. All right everyone, Zara called out, activating the safety monitors. Who wants to learn how to play? The response was a chaos of different communication methods, flashing lights, pheromone bursts, subsonic rumbles, and telepathic pulses. All expressing the same basic sentiment, nervous excitement. As she began explaining the rules, Zara caught sight of Professor Yx quietly installing additional security protocols. She probably should have been worried about all the safety measures, but instead, she felt a surge of anticipation. After all, what was the worst that could happen? The answer to that question would come much sooner than she expected, and it would involve 3 broken anti-gravity generators, 1 temporarily inverted blob, and the accidental discovery of a previously unknown form of faster-than-light travel. But for now, blissfully unaware of the chaos about to unfold, Zara Chen prepared to teach the galaxy how to play tag. Remember, she addressed her eager but apprehensive audience, the goal isn't to win. The goal is to have fun. But how do we measure fun? Asked a particularly serious quantum collective, their shared consciousness creating a harmonic buzz of confusion. Zara smiled. Trust me, you'll know it when you feel it. She had no idea just how right she would be about that. The first official interspecies recreational activity session began exactly as one might expect when introducing the concept of tag to beings who had never experienced purposeful chaos, with complete and utter confusion. But why would I pursue someone if I don't intend to consume them? Asked Blorp, a gelatinous blob student whose translucent form rippled with genuine bewilderment. And if I am it, hummed the quantum collective, their crystalline structure vibrating with uncertainty. Are we all it simultaneously across multiple probability matrices? Zara took a deep breath. Okay, let's try this another way. Think of it as a voluntary chase simulation where the goal is to. She was interrupted by a high-pitched squeal as a velociraptor-like saurian student named TZYX suddenly darted across the laboratory, apparently deciding to learn by doing. I am the IT. TZYX announced proudly, their feathers puffed up with excitement as they charged toward the nearest student, who happened to be a gaseous Nebulian named Whisper. Wait, TZYX, they're gaseous, you can't. Zara's warning came too late. TZYX ran straight through Whisper's cloudy form, creating an interesting spiral pattern in the Nebulian's normally stable gas structure. Several safety monitors began beeping frantically. Fascinating. Whisper exclaimed, their voice coming from multiple points as their dispersed form slowly reassembled. I have never experienced molecular disruption in this recreational context before. KTXT's skin rippled with the pattern that meant imminent disaster. Perhaps we should establish some species-specific guidelines first? But it was too late. The chaos had begun. The quantum collective, attempting to participate, had split into their component consciousnesses and were now trying to tag themselves across different dimensional planes. This was creating small but noticeable ripples in the local spacetime continuum. Blorp, finally grasping the concept of pursuit, had developed an innovative strategy of splitting into smaller droplets and trying to surround other players. Unfortunately, they hadn't quite mastered the art of reforming, resulting in several miniature blorps bouncing around the laboratory like organic ping-pong balls. Student Chen, Professor YX's voice cut through the growing chaos, his mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. The Dean is arriving in approximately 3 minutes to observe our progress. Zara looked around the laboratory in horror. The Saurian was still charging through the Nebulian repeatedly, creating increasingly complex gas patterns. The quantum collective's dimensional experiments had caused 3 monitoring devices to start displaying readings in what appeared to be negative numbers. And Blorp's scattered components were showing no signs of reunion. Emergency Protocol Alpha, she shouted, activating her administrator override on the safety monitors. Everyone freeze. To her surprise and relief, they actually did, though in the case of the quantum collective, freezing meant existing in only 4 dimensions instead of their usual 7. Okay, Zara said, trying to project calm authority. Let's review some basic concepts. First, physical contact should be species appropriate. TZYX, please stop running through Whisper, they're starting to look like a Klein bottle. The Saurian ducked their head apologetically, while the Nebulian gradually untwisted themselves from their topological adventure. Second, Blorp, while your tactical thinking is impressive, maybe try to maintain at least 51% mass coherence? The cleanup crew is already giving me dirty looks. The scattered Blorp droplets began reluctantly congregating, though 2 rebellious globules continued playing hide-and-seek behind a quantum stabilizer. And quantum collective, Zara turned to the shimmering crystalline structure, let's keep the game in our current universe, okay? The mathematics department is complaining about reality fluctuations in their calculations. Just then, the laboratory doors swooshed open to reveal Dean Vrax's glowing form, accompanied by what appeared to be half the faculty. Zara felt her heart sink, until she noticed something extraordinary. Every single student in the room, despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, was exhibiting signs of genuine enjoyment. The Saurian's feathers were glowing with excitement chromatophores. The Nebulian had adopted a previously unknown gaseous configuration that their species' medical database listed as euphoric dispersal pattern. Even the quantum collective's crystals were resonating at what their monitors identified as happiness frequencies. Fascinating, Dean Vrax pulsed, their energy form brightening with interest. Student Chen, are these behavioral patterns normal for recreational activity? Zara glanced at a group of smaller blorps playing tag with their own severed droplets, then at the quantum collective who had somehow taught a monitoring drone to exist in multiple states simultaneously, and finally at TZYX who was now attempting to teach Whisper how to form themselves into a chase-optimal aerodynamic configuration. Well, she said carefully, I would say this is actually quite restrained for a first session. The dean's energy pattern shifted through several complex formations. And the participants, they are experiencing positive responses? Check the monitors, KTXT offered, their skin rippling with what Zara now recognized as pride. Endorphin levels, or species equivalents, are up across the board. Stress indicators down by an average of 47%. And look at the social interaction metrics. The faculty crowded around the main display screen, those capable of crowding, anyway. The data was undeniable. Despite, or perhaps because of, the chaos, the experiment was working. There is, however, one small concern, Professor YX clicked nervously. The quantum collective's dimensional explorations seemed to have had an unexpected side effect. Everyone turned to look at where the crystalline beings were still playing. Or more accurately, where they had been playing. In their spot was now what appeared to be a small, localized time loop. Oh dear, Zara muttered. That's new. New is good. TZYX announced enthusiastically, still chasing Whisper's ever-shifting gaseous form. Chaos is learning. And surprisingly, as Zara watched her unlikely group of students accidentally discovering new laws of physics through play, she realized the Saurian might be onto something. This wasn't just recreation anymore, it was evolution in action. Dean Vrax, she said, turning to the glowing administrator, I believe we're ready to proceed with Phase 2. There's a Phase 2? Professor YX's mandibles clicked in alarm. Oh yes, Zara grinned, watching as Blorp finally managed to reassemble themselves, only to immediately split again in excitement. We're just getting started. The small time loop hiccuped, briefly showing the quantum collective executing a perfect game of four-dimensional tag, before resuming its temporal dance. Phase 2 was going to be interesting. 2 weeks after the infamous first tag session, Zara found herself standing before the Academy's Scientific Council, facing an unexpected problem, too much success. The holoscreen behind her displayed statistics that would have seemed impossible just months ago. As you can see, she gestured to the scrolling data, participating students have shown a 73% increase in creative problem-solving abilities. Cross-species collaboration is up by 89%. And perhaps most surprisingly, we've documented 15 accidental scientific breakthroughs during recreational sessions. Including, Dean Vrax pulsed with what Zara had learned to recognize as dry humor, the quantum collective's discovery of recreational time manipulation. Which the physics department is still trying to replicate, Professor YX added, his mandibles twitching with barely contained excitement. The normally reserved professor had become an unexpected advocate for the program, especially after witnessing a group of blob students inventing an entirely new form of fluid dynamics during an impromptu game of molecular tag. That's actually what I wanted to discuss, Zara said, pulling up a new holographic display. I propose we expand the program. New games, more species, dedicated recreational spaces. Student Chen, interrupted council member ZYX Tal, a being composed entirely of living mathematics, are you suggesting we institutionalize chaos? Structured chaos, Zara corrected quickly. And yes. Look at these results. She brought up another display showing a group of traditionally incompatible species engaged in a modified version of Capture the Flag. The Nebulians had formed themselves into living fog banks to provide cover for their solid-state teammates. The Quantum Collective was using their newfound temporal abilities to coordinate strategy across multiple timelines. Even the normally solitary crystalline entities had learned to form temporary lattice structures for better teamwork. More importantly, KTXT added, their skin rippling with academic excitement, we're seeing unprecedented developments in interspecies communication and adaptation. The footage shifted to show a recent breakthrough. A blob student had discovered they could temporarily alter their surface tension to bounce a Nebulian player across the field like a living gas balloon. The resulting technique had not only revolutionized their game strategy but had also sparked 3 new research projects in xenobiological physics. Furthermore, Zara continued, we've had requests from other departments to develop subject-specific recreational activities. The temporal mathematics faculty is particularly interested in the quantum collective's 4-dimensional tag variants. Council member ZYX Dow's equations flickered thoughtfully. You are suggesting that play could be educational? It already is. Zara pulled up more data. Look at the test scores from participating students. They're not just having fun, they're learning to think differently. To adapt. To innovate. There have been incidents, Professor Zhrl pulsed darkly, their tentacles writhing with concern. Minor ones. Zara protested. And each one has led to valuable discoveries. Yes, the Saurian Racing League accidentally achieved faster-than-light speeds, but now the engineering department is studying their momentum conservation breakthrough. And when Blorp discovered they could use quantum entanglement during hide-and-seek. We had to evacuate 3 laboratories, Professor Zhrl interrupted. But we also revolutionized our understanding of blob physics. KTXT countered, their skin practically strobing with enthusiasm. Blorp's entire species is revising their molecular interaction theories based on what they learned during that game. Dean Vrax's energy form shimmered thoughtfully. The academic benefits are undeniable. However, the logistics of expanding the program would be challenging. Zara grinned. She'd been waiting for this opening. Actually, I have a proposal for that too. She activated a new hologram, showing detailed plans for what she'd started calling the Recreational Research Complex. We convert the old zero-gravity chamber into a multi-purpose play space, she explained as the plans rotated slowly. Adjustable gravity fields for different species comfort levels. Quantum stabilizers for our more dimensionally adventurous players. Phase shift chambers for incorporating non-corporeal beings. And most importantly, a full suite of scientific monitoring equipment to document every discovery, accidental or otherwise. The council chamber filled with the various sounds, lights, and electromagnetic pulses that indicated intense discussion. Zara held her breath, metaphorically, since she'd learned that actual breath-holding made some council members unnecessarily concerned about human oxygen requirements. Finally, Dean Vrax spoke. The resources required would be considerable. Less than you might think, Zara countered. Especially since the engineering department has offered to help with construction. Apparently, watching the Quantum Collective's time loop tag games gave them some ideas about sustainable energy generation. And the physics department wants to study the spatial anomalies created during multi-species sports, KTXT added. They've offered to supply all the quantum monitoring equipment. Even the mathematics department is interested, Zara pressed her advantage. Something about the blob students' new fluid dynamics equations having implications for their theoretical work. The council chamber hummed with energy as the members communicated in their various ways. Zara could feel the momentum shifting in her favor. Then TZYX burst into the chamber, feathers glowing with excitement. Apologies for interruption, the Saurian announced, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. But must show council important discovery. Before anyone could object, TZYX activated their personal holoprojector. The air filled with images of what appeared to be. Zara squinted. Was that the Nebulian choir practicing formation flying while playing musical tag with a group of crystalline harmonics students? We have invented new art form. TZYX proclaimed proudly. Recreational performance with quantum harmonic accompaniment. The council watched in stunned silence as the Nebulians wove complex patterns through the air, their gaseous forms creating ethereal sculptures, while the crystalline students resonated at frequencies that somehow managed to sound like a cross between classical music and laughter. That's beautiful, Professor YX clicked softly, his compound eyes whirling in complex patterns of appreciation. And completely unprecedented, added Council Member ZYX Tal, their mathematical form reconfiguring rapidly as they tried to analyze the patterns. The harmonic equations alone. Dean Vrax's energy form pulsed brightly. Student Chen. Yes, Dean? Zara tried to keep her voice steady, professional. Your proposal for the recreational research complex is approved. With one condition. Anything, Zara said quickly. The dean's form sparkled with what she could have sworn was mischief. I want to participate in the next game session. The chamber erupted in surprised reactions. Dean Vrax, the most dignified being in the academy, wanted to play? Of course. Zara beamed. We're actually planning a multi-dimensional scavenger hunt for tomorrow. The Quantum Collective is teaching us how to safely navigate their probability matrices. Perhaps, Professor YX clicked hastily, we should start the dean with something simpler. Like temporal tag? Temporal tag is for beginners. TZYX announced. Dean should try quantum hide-and-seek. Very educational. As the council chamber descended into an enthusiastic discussion of game variants suitable for energy-based beings, Zara exchanged a look with KTXT. Their skin was rippling with the pattern that meant, what have we started? But watching the normally staid council members debate the relative merits of different recreational activities, seeing their various appendages and energy fields gesturing with genuine excitement, Zara knew exactly what they'd started, a revolution. And it was only the beginning. News of the Academy's recreational research initiative spread across the galaxy faster than a quantum-entangled blob during hide-and-seek. 6 months after the first game of tag, Zara found herself addressing not just Academy officials, but representatives from a dozen different galactic institutions. As you can see, she gestured to the massive holodisplay showing live feeds from the newly completed recreational research complex. We've moved well beyond simple pursuit games. The assembled dignitaries watched in fascination as students from hundreds of species engaged in activities that defied conventional physics, and occasionally, reality itself. In one chamber, a group of energy beings were playing wavelength tag with Dean Vrax, their forms shifting through spectacular patterns of light as they chased each other through the electromagnetic spectrum. The Dean, it turned out, was surprisingly competitive. Another section showed the Quantum Collective teaching a class of non-temporal species how to experience multiple timelines simultaneously through what they called probability sports. The fact that they sometimes scored points before the game actually started had initially caused some controversy, but everyone had eventually agreed that temporal paradoxes were just part of the fun. Most impressive, hummed Ambassador Exthal of the Regelian Science Consortium, their crystalline form vibrating with interest. But what of the practical applications? Zara grinned. KTXT, would you like to share the latest statistics? Her friend's skin rippled with professional pride as they brought up new data streams. In addition to the documented improvements in academic performance and interspecies cooperation, we've recorded 147 accidental scientific breakthroughs, 23 new forms of artistic expression, and what appears to be the spontaneous evolution of 5 new sports that technically exist outside normal spacetime. Outside spacetime, questioned a representative from the Galactic Education Board, their tentacles twisting in confusion. The Quantum Collective gets very creative during playoffs, Zara explained. But more importantly, look at this. She switched the display to show the Academy's main gathering space. Where once different species had self-segregated into careful, orderly groups, now the scene was one of cheerful chaos. Blob students were teaching crystallines how to modify their lattice structure for better agility. Nebulians were helping Saurians perfect their gas phase transit techniques. Even the normally reclusive mathematics beings were engaging in what they called recreational equation solving with organic students. What you're seeing, Zara said proudly, is the future of galactic education. When we remove the barriers between work and play, between species and disciplines, incredible things happen. Just then, an excited TZYX burst into the presentation chamber, their feathers glowing so brightly they were almost incandescent. Most amazing discovery, they announced, completely ignoring the assembled dignitaries. Must show immediately. Before anyone could stop them, they activated their personal holoprojector. The air filled with images of what appeared to be. Zara blinked in astonishment. Was that Blorp teaching a group of energy beings how to temporarily exist in liquid form? Crossphase state transfer through play. TZYX proclaimed proudly. Very revolutionary. Very fun. The dignitaries watched in stunned silence as Blorp, now glowing with borrowed energy patterns, demonstrated how to maintain molecular cohesion while existing in multiple states of matter simultaneously. The energy beings, their forms shimmering with excitement, were attempting to master surface tension. That's impossible, whispered a physicist from the Galactic Science Academy. The energy requirements alone. Oh, that's not even the best part, Zara said cheerfully. Watch what happens when they add the quantum collective to their game. The hologram shifted to show several crystalline beings joining the activity. What followed defied description in any known language, a spectacular dance of matter, energy, and probability, with players shifting not just between physical states but between different fundamental forces of nature. They're calling it phase shift freeze tag, KTXT explained, their skin rippling with scientific excitement. The rules are, well, we're still trying to document them. They seem to change depending on which universe you're observing from. Ambassador X, the less crystalline form, was vibrating so intensely they were starting to resonate with the room's quantum stabilizers. This is beyond mere recreation, they hummed. This is evolution in action. Exactly. Zara beamed. And it's not just physical evolution. Look at our latest social metrics. New data streams appeared, showing complex networks of interaction and collaboration that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Species that had once considered each other incompatible were now forming deep bonds through play. Academic disciplines that had been strictly separated were blending in innovative ways. We've even had to create new categories for scientific papers, KTXT added. The quantum collective's latest research on temporal sports theory doesn't fit into any traditional field. Speaking of which, Zara continued, we've had to expand our facilities again. It turns out that when you have multiple instances of the same game happening across different timelines, space requirements get a bit non-linear. She brought up plans for the latest addition to the recreational research complex, a facility that seemed to fold in on itself in geometrically impossible ways. The mathematics beings helped with the design, she explained. They've become surprisingly enthusiastic about recreational architecture, especially after discovering that certain game patterns can be expressed as self-solving equations. Just then, a small temporal anomaly appeared in the center of the room. A familiar crystalline form emerged, their facets glowing with excitement. Future present past greetings, the quantum collective representative announced. We are pleased to report that the inter-timeline tournament has been a complete success. All 7 past versions and 4 future iterations of the games have concluded simultaneously. We won every match, except the ones where we lost, which were also victories from a quantum perspective. The dignitaries tried to process this information while Zara quickly checked the temporal stabilization readings. Everything looked normal, or at least, as normal as things ever got around here. And, the quantum collective continued, their crystal structure vibrating with pride, we have invented a new game. We call it Schrödinger Sports. You don't know if you're playing or not until you observe the outcome, but you have to strategize for both possibilities simultaneously. That's fascinating, Ambassador Exfil managed, their own crystalline form trying to adapt to the quantum possibilities. But how do you keep score? That's the best part, the quantum collective chimed. The score exists in a superposition of all possible values until the end of the game, which occurs at multiple points throughout the timeline, including before it begins. Zara watched with amusement as the assembled dignitaries tried to wrap their various sensory organs around this concept. She caught KTXT giving her the skin ripple pattern that meant we've created monsters, but in a good way. Perhaps, she suggested diplomatically, we should move on to some of our less temporally complex activities? The Blob synchronized swimming team has developed some fascinating new approaches to fluid dynamics. As she guided the tour through the more conventional areas of the complex, conventional being a relative term when one of the training rooms occasionally existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, Zara couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. What had started as a simple game of tag had evolved into something far beyond her wildest dreams. The galaxy was learning to play, and in doing so, it was transforming itself in wonderful and unpredictable ways. And they were just getting started. After all, she thought with a grin as she watched a group of mathematics beings teaching probability theory through a game they'd invented called quantum hopscotch, they hadn't even introduced them to soccer yet. That would have to wait until they figured out how to keep the ball from existing in multiple states of matter simultaneously. Although, come to think of it, maybe that would make the game more interesting. The day of the first Galactic Recreation Tournament dawned across multiple dimensions simultaneously, which immediately caused several scheduling headaches. Zara stood in the central control room of the expanded recreational research complex, watching as representatives from over 1,000 worlds tried to navigate the organized chaos she had helped create. Timeline convergence in 3-2-1. KTXT announced, their skin rippling with concentrated effort as they coordinated with the Quantum Collective's probability managers. All temporal streams synchronized, mostly. Mostly? Zara raised an eyebrow. Well, the Quantum Division insists on playing their matches across all possible timelines simultaneously. But we've contained the temporal spillover to just 4 parallel universes this time. Progress. Zara grinned. How's the phase shift arena holding up? They turned to observe the specially designed space, where Blorp was leading a warm-up session for the Multi-State Matter League. The entire team of blobs was practicing their recently perfected technique of existing in solid, liquid, and gaseous states simultaneously while maintaining enough coherence to score points. Quantum stability at 94%, reported a mathematics being, their equations glowing with excitement. Though we're detecting some interesting anomalies in the probability field whenever they attempt their new state superposition spike technique. The tournament had grown far beyond anything Zara had initially imagined. What had started as simple games had evolved into entirely new forms of competition that challenged not just physical abilities, but the very laws of physics themselves. Incoming transmission from Nebula Sector. TZYX announced, their feathers pulsing with rainbow colors. They had recently learned this trick from the energy beings, and were now obsessed with chromatic communication. Gaseous conference teams requesting emergency rule clarification. The holographic display showed a heated debate between several Nebulian teams about whether temporarily achieving plasma state during molecular tag constituted an unfair advantage. The energy being referees were having trouble maintaining objectivity, mainly because they kept getting excited and joining in the games themselves. Tell them plasma state is allowed, but only for 3 nanoseconds per phase transition, Zara decided. And remind them that achieving nuclear fusion during gameplay is still strictly prohibited. We're still repairing the scorch marks from last week's practice session. Just then, Dean Vrax materialized beside her, their energy form practically sparkling with enthusiasm. The once dignified administrator had become one of the most passionate advocates for recreational research, especially after discovering their talent for 4-dimensional chess, played with pieces that existed across multiple probability states, naturally. Student Chen, or should I say, Director of Interspecies Recreation, the Dean pulsed warmly. The Galactic Education Board's representatives have arrived. Along with some unexpected guests. Zara followed the Dean's gestured energy patterns to the main observation deck. Her jaw dropped. Alongside the expected dignitaries were beings she had only seen in historical records, the Ancient Ones, a species so advanced they rarely interacted with younger civilizations. Are they here to play? She whispered in awe. Actually, the Dean's energy patterns shifted to what Zara had learned to recognize as suppressed amusement. They're here to learn. Apparently, our chaotic approach to recreational physics has caught their attention. They're particularly interested in the Quantum Collective's temporal sports programs. Before Zara could process this information, multiple alarms started chiming simultaneously. KTXT's skin shifted to emergency alert patterns. "We've got a situation in the probability arena," they reported. "The Quantum Collective's junior team has accidentally created a recursive time loop during their warm-up exercises. They're now competing against future and past versions of themselves, and somehow everyone is winning." "That's not even the worst part," added a mathematics being, their equations turning red with concern. "Their probability matrices are starting to influence the other events. The Blob Olympics are beginning to quantum tunnel between venues, and the Nebulian flight formation team is existing in multiple states of matter simultaneously." Zara took a deep breath. This was exactly the kind of chaos she had trained for. "Right. Initialize the temporal stabilizers. Get the physics department's emergency response team on standby. And somebody please make sure Blorp doesn't try to solve this by dividing themselves across multiple dimensions again. We're still missing 3 of their quantum echoes from last time." To her surprise, one of the ancient ones floated forward, their multidimensional form rippling with what might have been amusement. Their thoughts manifested directly in everyone's consciousness. "Perhaps we can assist. It has been millennia since we have encountered such creative applications of fundamental forces. This play concept of yours is most intriguing." What followed was perhaps the most extraordinary exhibition match in the history of any universe. The Ancient Ones, drawing on their unfathomable knowledge of cosmic forces, joined in a massive multidimensional game that combined elements of all the sports the Academy had developed. Quantum tag merged with probability chess. Phase shift volleyball blended with temporal athletics. The Blob team's matter-state transitions harmonized with the Nebulian's gaseous choreography, while the mathematics beings calculated the impossibly beautiful patterns that emerged. Dean Vrax, unable to resist, joined in with a technique that involved manipulating pure energy through 11 dimensions simultaneously. The resulting display caused several fundamental constants to temporarily recalibrate themselves, though fortunately, the universe proved elastic enough to bounce back. "You know," KTXT commented, their skin showing patterns Zara had never seen before, possibly because they represented colors that hadn't existed until the Ancient Ones started playing. "When you first suggested teaching aliens to play games, I thought you were merely being a typical chaotic human. And now?" Zara asked, watching as a group of Quantum Collective youngsters taught an Ancient One how to exist in multiple timelines while maintaining perfect game formation. "Now I realize you were being an exceptionally chaotic human." KTXT's skin rippled with affection. And somehow, that made all the difference. The tournament continued for what might have been hours or centuries. Temporal measurements had become somewhat subjective around the probability fields. But when the final matches concluded, simultaneously across several timelines, with quantum uncertainty ensuring that every team both won and lost in various probability streams, something remarkable had happened. The barriers between species, between past and future, between work and play, had dissolved. The Ancient Ones were exchanging temporal gaming strategies with Academy students. The mathematics beings had developed entirely new branches of physics just to explain some of the moves they'd witnessed. Even the most serious diplomatic representatives were asking about recreational program implementations for their home worlds. As Zara stood in the central control room, watching the joyful chaos unfold across multiple dimensions, Dean Vrax materialized beside her once again. "The Galactic Council has reached a decision," they announced, their energy form pulsing with barely contained excitement. "They want to establish similar programs throughout the galaxy. They're calling it the Universal Recreation Initiative." "That's wonderful." Zara beamed. "Though we should probably warn them about the temporal paradoxes. And the quantum entanglement issues. And maybe mention that sometimes the games develop consciousness and start playing themselves." Indeed, the Dean's form sparkled with amusement. "They've requested that you head the initiative. As the originator of what the Ancient Ones are calling the most significant advancement in cross-species relations since the invention of faster-than-light travel." Zara looked out across the complex, where beings from across space and time were learning, growing, and playing together in ways that defied conventional physics and traditional boundaries. Blorp was teaching an ancient one how to modify their multidimensional form for better agility. The Quantum Collective was explaining to a group of diplomats how losing a game in one timeline could be strategically advantageous in another. TZYX was demonstrating their new chromatically enhanced victory dance to a fascinated group of energy beings. You know, she said thoughtfully, when I first came to the academy, I just wanted to help aliens understand the importance of having fun. I never imagined that you would revolutionize galactic society through structured chaos? KTXT finished, their skin rippling with pride. Create new fields of physics through games? Teach beings who have existed for millions of years how to play. Actually, Zara grinned, watching as a temporal anomaly resolved itself into a perfect game-winning move across 6 dimensions simultaneously. I never imagined it would be quite this much fun. Above them, the mathematics beings had begun calculating the probability patterns of joy itself, finding to their delight that it could be expressed as an ever-expanding equation of infinite possibilities. The universe, it seemed, had learned to play. And somewhere, in a timeline that might have been the past or future or both, a simple game of tag was just beginning again, starting the whole wonderful cycle of chaos and discovery anew. After all, in a universe infinite in its possibilities, why not play in all of them?